Welcome back to another episode of Around the 412. I'm Tyler. With me, as always, is my co host, Smitty. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, any social media you can find us. We're on there. Also, give us a subscribe on YouTube. We're trying to blow that up and trying to post reels is Instagram, shorts or YouTube. Trying to just grow our socials, people. And then before we get into the show, as always, at least for this last week, we have a couple GoFundMe's to talk about. Our first is there's only, by the time you're listening to this, probably a day or two left for Rocking Around the 412, our annual Christmas fundraiser, which we raise money with the help of all of you to try to provide Christmas for kids across the local Pittsburgh area. Smitty and I never had to really worry about where Christmas was coming from growing up. And so for those that are less fortunate in that regard, we try to help out any way we can. We've been able to do this for the last 5 years. And so even though there's only a day or two left, there's still time to get involved if you'd like to. And if you're listening to this and you think, oh, maybe it's too late or not, you can just reach out to us or send us a tweet on Twitter, see if it's still available, and we'll let you know. But yeah, that'll be linked in the description, and you can find that at Rocking Around the 412 on GoFundMe.com as well as the pinned tweet on our Twitter. The second GoFundMe is Isla Keene's Future GoFundMe. Unfortunately, a couple months ago, Dalton Keene tragically passed away at a Steelers game, and he left behind his 2-year-old daughter. And we cannot help with the emotional burden that can wear, but we could try to help out with the financial burden that it can leave them with. And so there's a GoFundMe set up, and it's called Isla Keene's Future. That will also be linked in the description of this show, anywhere you're listening to it, and on YouTube. And there's actually new news regarding Isla as well in Rocking Around the 412. So I'll toss it to Smitty to fill you in on that.
Yeah, I almost wish you didn't have to, because I feel like I'm not going to be able to get through this without getting pretty emotional, because it's a different type of emotion though. Like, I just think it's such a beautiful thing we're making of a bad situation. So Isla was supposed to be a recipient for Rocking Around the 412. Like, we fully planned on her receiving, gifts and just spoiling her this Christmas and doing everything that we could to make her Christmas as special as possible. And when I reached out to her mother, Kaylee, she very politely declined, but what she wanted to do was, in Dalton's name, and to show Isla how important it is to just be a good person and what Christmas is really all about, wanted us to take that money and adopt children from the Christmas tree that they always have at the Salvation Army. So at her work last year, she did the same thing. Her and her coworkers adopted some kids for Christmas. And they have these Christmas lists literally put together on the tree, and you can just go and pick a kid off of a tree and say, I want to provide Christmas for this kid. And with Kaylee's help, we were able to do that for 15 different children. So literally, I spent the entire day today. Like, I got home from Target like 20 minutes before we started recording this show.
Yeah, I can see some GIFs in the background. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see some in the background.
So that blue box that's right behind me that you can see right there is a trampoline, like a 3 to 6 year old trampoline. But I got a bunch of stuff today. I spent a lot of money today on Amazon and at Target. But I was shopping from like 2 p.m. until like 20 minutes ago in total. So
that's crazy.
Yeah, really ramping it up now. But just to get back to what we were talking about with this though, just an absolutely massive shout out to Kaylee. I mean, obviously she didn't have to do that. We know that she could have, said, hey, yeah, I want my daughter to have the best possible Christmas thanks to you guys. But she realizes she's already going to have a very nice Christmas, and she wants to make sure that these kids have something to open on Christmas as well. And for her specifically, I don't know if she would, want me to say this or care if I did, but she herself was taking care of 3 kids as well. So we're adopting 12 of those 15. She's adopting 3, but we're doing it in Dalton's name. And to really just show, Isla, when she grows up, and we talk about this and talk about her father, the type of person that he was and what he would want to come from this situation if he were here. So obviously a very tragic situation, but, what are we going to make of this? We can't, she knows that she can't just sit around and do nothing to make something so beautiful come of a tragic situation. I can't speak highly enough about Kaylee and what she wanted to do. Really just embodies the spirit of Christmas. So I've been talking to her pretty much nonstop for the last week or so, working on her pretty much hand in hand with this. And, she went out and did the shopping on her own for those 3 kids and took care of it within like 24 hours. And like I said, I got done with 11 of the 12 kids today. The only thing is I don't know. We're waiting to hear back from the Salvation Army representative that that Kaylee's been talking with, because the one kid wants stuff for their Xbox, but the problem is we don't know which Xbox console it is. So it literally just said Xbox. So we got to find out, is it the one? Is it the S? So 11 of the 12 have been taken care of. The other one will have to wait until tomorrow. But just awesome stuff. And I'm so honored to be a part of this. I believe by the time that we're going to wrap this thing up, I feel pretty confident in saying we're going to pass $5,000 this year, which would be $25,000 total since we started in 2018, which is just crazy. I mean, if we keep on this pace, if we can have another year like, last year at some point in here, hopefully, I mean, hey, hopefully this year, hopefully just a ridiculous week, but maybe next year, something like that. I just, let's just keep ballooning this thing and make it something that everybody knows about and talks about and contributes to, because I would love you mentioned you can see some gifts starting to pile up behind me. You can see some are wrapped behind this shoulder. I would love if I'm just like basically up against my camera because I can't move while recording these shows because there's so much stuff behind me.
Right. That'd be awesome.
But the link to these things that we're talking about will be in the description of the show, wherever you are watching or listening to it. Again, that's Rocking Around the 412. If you can search that on GoFundMe, it's our pinned tweet on Twitter, which I am back on. You can find it just searching it on Google, I'm sure. Just type in Rocking Around the 412. And the other is the Isla Keen Fund, which stays open. I believe that's at like $34,000 or so. So great stuff happening. Once again, shout out to Kaylee, shout out to Isla, and shout out to Dalton for having such a beautiful family. Let's jump into some sports now. Nothing to talk about with the Pirates. I mean, they made some moves official, I guess, that we had already talked about last week. The only thing that I will mention about them is it's kind of disappointing, in my opinion, that after, the trade for Choi, after signing Santana, they get a relief pitcher, and then Velasquez, I was hoping was going to be more of like a maybe rotation piece, more of a swingman guy. But the fact that they're not signing it, they haven't signed another starter, and they're just flying off the market, kind of tells me he is going to be given a rotation spot. I'm a little bit discouraged by what has happened in free agency since the way it started out, where kind of like, okay, maybe they are going to be, somewhat of buyers this year.
Yeah, honestly, I would have liked to have thought I could get my hopes up, but even though it's a new regime and new everything, new season, new off season, I'm not shocked. I'll say that. I'm not really surprised that there's no movement or very minimal movement. We don't really have anybody getting long-term contracts. We've got some 1-year contracts, which has kind of been the theme for the Pirates the past couple years. But it is what it is. I'm so like down on this team now, especially since the announcement of like the what's his name? What's the trade?
This just shows the show. Brian Reynolds. This just
Brian
goes to
Reynolds.
show you where we're at with the Pirates right now.
Yeah, I honestly have no care in the world about the Pirates right now, and I know that's bad because we're a sports show, we're a Pittsburgh sports show, and we cover the Pirates, and we've been covering the Pirates the entire time. But it's almost like driving me to the point where I just don't really have much interest. I mean, I know I'm going to watch them, and I know I'm going to have to talk about them on here. But if I didn't have those things, like if I didn't have this, I really would have not much interest going into the Pirates besides maybe watching individually O'Neal Cruz.
I think that's it. Like for me, I've just become such a casual fan where it's like I root for players, but I can't get behind. Like I just can't personally invest everything into a team where I feel like they're not even playing in the same league as all these other teams. Like how can I ever expect the Pirates to be able to compete with some of these other teams? It's like just hard for me to
being linked to Syndergaard today.
I mean, it's just hard for me to envision a world. Yeah. And it's like, what is he like? Maybe he doesn't even end up in the rotation, but who cares? It's $13 million on a 1-year deal. Like,
yeah.
And it's just, in the Pirates, they're not going to do that. Like if they spend $13 million on a player, that guy's their opening day starter for sure. Mm-hmm. Like they cannot afford to take those types of risks. Or they won't take those risks, I should say. But it's gotten to the point for me where I'm just rooting for individual players. It's like I'm a Pirates fan, but I can't let them impact my mood anymore. I can't dive headfirst into it and really get invested into it the way that I used to. I mean, I look at the guys that we're friends with that have been in this organization. We just saw 3 within the last year and a half leave the organization. Jeff,
Yeah.
Hartlieb now with the Marlins, Bly's with the Tigers, and Jared just went to the Angels in the Roll 5 draft. And seeing those guys like move on, that was kind of like my rooting interest at this point, because like you said, like I'm a Pirates fan, but it's not to the level that it used to be.
Well, I mean, especially now, because you and I have been very valiant defenders of the Pirates and how they operate and how they are a small market team and how basically just the financial way baseball is just it's not set up for teams like the Pirates to have long-term success year after year. And we've been a defender of that and some of the moves that teams have done. But I'm also looking at the team like this year, last year, and it's like, what are they doing to improve on the things that they can improve, though? I mean, you bring in G-Man Choi, that's good. You improve on first base, if nothing, or DH, if nothing else. But I just don't see them doing everything in their power to try to win as many baseball games. And that's where it's like, I'm not to the point where I'm on the I'm flipping to the sell the team side and I hate the Pirates, but it's just like I just don't have any interest in the team. They're just kind of neutral to me. Like I want them to win, but at the end of the day, I just don't really care anymore.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. There is validity to the market size playing an impact in the way that the team is going to spend. However, you see teams in similar market sizes be willing to go above and beyond and open up the checkbooks and pay
I just look at
guys and
Cleveland.
go all in. And yeah, I mean, look at the way that some of these other organizations operate that are in similar situations. So it's like, while there is credence to what we're saying about the market size, some teams just don't care. I mean, if you're going to own a sports team, it can't just be about making the money like it has been for the Pirates. I don't. I mean, at some point it has to change. And the thing is, too, the Pirates, Bob Nutting, everybody involved with the Pirates was completely fine with the CBA staying the way that it was. They voted for it. If they felt like they couldn't compete with these other teams, why did they do that? So to me, that was a vote in them saying, we feel like regardless of our situation compared to theirs from a financial aspect, we feel like that we are, able to be on an even playing field. If that's the case, open up the checkbooks.
Yeah, honestly, it's just like I'm happy it's not baseball season yet, because when it's baseball season, especially when we get to the month of, I'm trying to think, like month of June, where like OTAs are over, we're
Yeah.
still like a month and a half to training camp, and it's just baseball. And I'm assuming like the Penguins are not in the Stanley Cup final and everything like that. Like it's just baseball, bruh. This show is going to be so depressing. Just because, like,
I mean, we've done it for what, 4 summers now, but it's like
I
crazy to
know,
think about. Yeah.
but I don't think I've ever felt this way about the Pirates in the entirety of us doing the show, even though they have been bad pretty much the entire time we've done the show. I mean, besides 2018, where they had that random winning season that nobody seems to remember.
Yeah.
They've been bad the entire stretch that we've been doing this show. So,
Uh-huh.
but I've never felt the way that I do right now. Just like, it's not even that I dislike the team or anything like that. It's just no interest. I don't really have much interest in the team as a whole. Like, show me what Cabrian's doing. I want to see what O'Neill's doing. But outside of that, like, I don't believe in what the team is doing right now.
Yeah, it's a wonder that Brian Reynolds once traded when we're talking so highly about the organization. Let's switch gears a little bit. Talk about the Steelers, who lose to the Ravens 16-14 on Sunday. This is kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, in my opinion, for the season. The conversation on this episode could have been very different. I mean, if they go out and win this football game, I think we're starting to talk about they're chasing, that one of those wild card seeds potentially, with the way that everything else was kind of starting to shape up. But losing this game to me was really the dagger in the Steelers season. I mean, if they win out, they have a 5% chance of making the playoffs. So at this point, we're looking for Kenny Pickett's progression, which is going to be something that we talk about in a little bit, because are we even going to see that be able to continue this next game? But in this football game, it's interesting because you look at the fact they only allow 16 points to the Ravens, and you're thinking, okay, well, all the blame has to fall on the offense. This really can't be the defense's fault. My issue with that, and why I put blame on the defense as well, allowing over 200 yards when they played about a half of football without their backup, Tyler Huntley. So they're down to Anthony Brown Jr., who is not an NFL quarterback, and they are literally just running the ball. You know what's going to happen. The Ravens could have said, this is where we're running the ball, and they still would have been effective doing it. The Steelers had no answer for the Ravens' run game, and I felt like we were watching a game from 2021 during that because there was just no solution. There was no answer. They tried so many different things, including, for whatever reason, playing Cam Hayward at nose tackle on Sunday, which that went well. But that to me is why I still, despite them giving up only 16 points to the Ravens, can put some blame on this defense, because we can no longer use the excuse that, TJ Watt's not there. Granted, he's certainly not 100%. He has not looked as effective. But we're back to them being the highest paid defense in football now, and they allowed 200 yards on the ground on Sunday to a team without their starter or backup for about a half of football.
Yeah, I mean, like I would say, like, they gave the Steelers a chance to win, but they still didn't look that great. It's kind of how I felt. I mean, this is going to mean nothing to people because they're not BYU fans. It's kind of how I felt whenever BYU played Notre Dame and they lost the game like 26-20 or something like that, but they gave up 500 yards of offense. Like the total score wasn't that bad, but they still gave it up, and that's kind of how I feel about the Steelers defense. The total, like 16 points, just looking in that by itself, is not a bad score to give up, but you want the Steelers to perform better in the run game, and that's why I think this offseason you got to really emphasize on, like, you got to get another defensive tackle to me, and then like really look at your linebackers, because that's what's hindering them in the run game, or at least on the defensive side of the ball. I think that the problem is there's so much inconsistency with this rush defense, and sometimes they look great. Sometimes nobody can move the ball. I mean, I think back to that New York Jets game where the Jets hadn't been able to move the ball on the ground pretty much the entire day. And then that's why in the fourth quarter, Robert Saleh said, well, screw this. And then we're just going to keep throwing it the entire time. And then the Steelers end up losing the game because they couldn't stop the pass. But then there's times like this where it seems like they're just Swiss cheese. And I don't know if that's just schematically, like they were being out-coached by the Ravens, because then to me, maybe that is a case, because I can't have a good explanation for why this defense, for as good as it should be, especially on payroll, is getting gashed the way they are to that Ravens offense on Sunday, even without a Lamar Jackson. I mean, imagine if Lamar's in this game and what the rushing totals look like then. I just can't really wrap my head around why it looks like that and why they're so inconsistent with it.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned this was a dominant day for the Ravens. I think a part of it is age, to be honest. I think they need a youth infusion on the defensive line. Obviously, like, nothing against Cam Hayward, one of the all-time greats in franchise history. I would love for him to be able to go out on top and win a Super Bowl ring. One of the most talked about topics is, if it's not going to happen in Pittsburgh, would you be okay with him going somewhere else to try to win a ring? But neither here nor there. Tyson Alualu, Monty Adams, they're not legit starting nose tackles in this league anymore. Like, Monty Adams is a nice athlete for the position. He's a nice contributor. He shouldn't be a starter. And he's done. He should have retired probably after last year.
My disappointment of the year is looking pretty good right now.
Yeah. Larry Ogunjobi hasn't been healthy, and I think it shows. I don't think he's been an $8 million player. They just lost Chris Wormley to a torn ACL on Sunday in this game as well. So, what was a bad situation on that defensive line is probably not going to get any better. DeMarvin Leal missed a significant amount of time, but now he's been back for a couple weeks, but they're really just using him primarily as an edge player. So they need to add on that defensive line, like you're saying, specifically in the interior of that defensive line this offseason. That needs to be a priority. But again, there's no point in continuing to harp on this. I think we could talk all day about what this team allowed on the ground. Let's flip it to the offense now and talk about really, how this team lost this football game, because they were moving the ball pretty well. I mean, they didn't really even have any 3 and outs once Kenny Pickett exited this game. And we're going to talk about that in a second too. But the problem was they would get on into Ravens territory and Mitch Trubisky would throw an interception. 3 interceptions in this game, 2 inside the 20-yard line. It's just so frustrating because 3 of his first 4 incompletions were interceptions. Like I said, I mean, he was moving the ball with ease. He looked fine. You were seeing him extend plays, get out of the pocket. He was breaking some tackles. I was like, man, this is kind of like reminiscent of Tampa Bay week. Kenny exits the game.
Yeah.
Mitch comes in and lights a fire under the team. He can kind of just play effort ball because there's nobody behind him. Like, what's going to happen? He is the guy for this week. No one can take his job. He doesn't have Kenny breathing down his neck anymore, and things were looking good. But he would get into the red zone, and you would see never once did he look away from Pat Freiermuth on those interceptions. He keyed in on his guy, and that's where he was going with the football. It didn't matter who was there. One of those was into triple coverage. Like, even if
that really is effort ball. Like,
yeah, even if Patrick Queen doesn't intercept the second one, somebody else is. Like, there was other guys there as well. It wasn't just Pat Freiermuth behind Patrick Queen. So I really, it's so frustrating. I would have rather gotten blown out in this football game than watch it happen like that, because just watching them leave points on the board in this way, getting into the red zone, forget 6, not even adding 3, just don't turn the football over in those situations, and the Steelers still win this football game.
Yeah, and that's the frustrating part, is because I look at this and I'm like, obviously there's no guarantee, but you think that with the way Kenny's been taking care of the ball, the Steelers are going to find a way to win this game if he doesn't get injured. So that's really frustrating on that end to think about that. But yeah, Mitch Trubisky, he's showing why he is not him. And that's why this week, and I don't know if we were going to talk about this, I am all aboard the start Mason Rudolph train. Because at this point, I don't think, especially against the Carolina Panthers, it's a bad opponent. So, and you're 5-8. You would have to go. Your record would have to be at worst 3-0-1 to avoid a losing season. So, I think you're basically at the point where you just say, screw it. Let's see what Mason can do, because obviously Mitch isn't going to get the job done. He had the chance on Sunday. There was no reason that he should have been like it's not like he was missing any of the skill position players. I mean, granted, Najee didn't have the same day on the ground that he has been for the previous like 3 or 4 games, but it's not like he was missing any wide receivers or anything like that. It was just he was making mistakes. And so that's why I'm like, let's see what Mason Rudolph can do. If Kenny can't go on Sunday, I'm all for Mason Rudolph just to see what you have there. I mean, because he's kind of like sat there the entire season and waited his turn, and he's been a pro about it. I'll give him respect for that. You haven't heard a peep from Mason Rudolph about anything in the preseason and this entire season. He's been really good about being that third string guy and just doing his job and preparing Kenny and preparing Mitch and trying to do what he can for this team to win. So I think to respect him back, give him the start on Sunday if Kenny can't go, and just see what happens. It could crash and burn, and you could always go back to Mitch like you did in this game. But I just don't see if you're trotting Mitch out there, I just don't think you're putting your best effort. Kind of like when we were saying you should start Kenny. I'm not saying Mason's going to be any better, but trotting Mitch out there to me isn't giving your best chance to win.
Yeah, it's so let's talk about why we're having this conversation. Kenny Pickett suffers his second concussion in very short order. We mentioned, that Tampa Bay week where Mitch had to come in and kind of brought them back and rejuvenated the offense, kind of lit a spark under them. That was when Kenny Pickett exited that game with a concussion. This game, same type of deal. He was dealing with a little bit of a knee issue too. They had originally said that he cleared concussion protocol. Tomlin kind of cleared it up by saying that they put him through further testing, and at that point he was removed from the game. Game. What in the world? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
What just happened?
I don't know what that was. I have no idea what that was.
When did I cut off?
Whenever he was removed in the game. That's when he was removed in the game.
Wow.
So if you can just pick up your sentence from there, I can cut the audio.
This would be a real treat for the people that get the video, though.
Yeah, I know.
So on my screen,
was I just sitting there?
it removed both of us on my screen.
Okay,
But
so
it
so
still
was
only
that
shows I have one bar of Wi-Fi.
well? Okay, so that's on your end, not my end, because
I'm
my
guessing,
end says
yeah.
I have 100 megabytes down. 110. Yeah, my end says 110 down and 16 up. So
I'm on my phone fine, though. This is...
come on, Manaka.
Yeah, my phone's going super fast. And this isn't going away. It's just saying connection's unstable. But I sound perfectly fine. Do I look fine?
I mean, now you do, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm just gonna roll with it.
Yeah. You were saying something like that's when he went out of the game.
Okay.
So if you want to just go from there, then YouTube, you get a funny show, but
yeah,
I'll try to splice the audio together on the actual. So like Spotify,
be sure to clip
Apple.
it. So Kenny leaves that game against Tampa, and Mitch comes in, kind of lights a spark under them. And that's kind of the same thing that it looked like was going to happen against Baltimore with the way that Mitch was moving the ball. But, for Kenny's sake here, one concussion is scary enough. To have two in your rookie season, it's kind of the same thing we talked about with like Pat Fryermuth, where it's like a little bit of a concern at this point. You gotta watch this going forward. I don't know if there's anything that like Kenny can necessarily do to avoid this. I definitely think like when you look at the way that the league is protecting quarterbacks, don't know how this wasn't a roughing the quarterback call considering some of the other ones we've seen. Not that prevents him from getting a concussion. This is another topic, but if Kenny's not able to go Sunday, I was going to bring this up. You already answered what you would do with going with Mason Rudolph over Mitch Trubisky. I think it's interesting because of the reason that I just said. Like Mitch was moving the ball well, but I go back to 2019 when Tomlin was having, Duck and Mason kind of going back and forth. And it was just literally his answer bluntly for why Duck was put in originally was he's not killing us. And right now, I looked at the quarterback situation for the Steelers. Is it possible that Mason wouldn't be killing the Steelers?
Just he don't turn the football over. To show he's not killing them.
Right. And I think that when you look at the Steelers offense, they're not explosive enough. They don't put up enough points to make up for turning the football over. It's the one thing. It's not the one thing. It's one thing, though, that they really, really cannot do. I mean, look at the Steelers' nice little stretch of football they had prior to this Ravens week. What was the difference in the football game since the bye week with Kenny? He wasn't turning the football over. That's really all that they can ask for from their quarterback at this point in this offense. And, Mitch did it 3 times on Sunday. So I definitely think that the door is open for Mason to be the guy on Sunday. If I am saying what I think the team is going to do, I still think, honestly, that Mitch starts. If it were me making the decision, I think I do start Mitch because he was moving the football, but the first turnover that he has, he's out of the game. Like it's a very short leash.
Yeah, I mean, I think my choice basically gets summed up to I think Mason deserves to start in this game just because of the way he's professionally handled himself throughout this season. I think respectfully, I think he deserves a shot to start.
Well, and here's the thing too that I'll bring up, and I want to. So I put out a thing on Instagram, just curious, like if anybody would have any questions for the show. We did get a couple. One of them was from Stubbs, and it was about like, look, in hindsight, the Trubisky signing made no sense for the Steelers. And if you could have told them prior to the draft that like Kenny Pickett's going to fall to 20 and you can take him, I don't think they signed Trubisky. I think they would have been fine with Mason Rudolph being their backup, but they signed Trubisky to add him to the quarterback room, and then Pickett fell into their lap. Everybody kind of moves down a peg. All of a sudden, Mason Rudolph's your number 3 quarterback. But I think you're right from a professional standpoint. I mean, he's kind of done everything by the book, and now with him just kind of embracing that role. Didn't ask for a trade, didn't ask to be released. I mean, how many times do we see that? Guys not happy in situations, go in public with their situations, voicing their frustrations on social media, and he hasn't done any of that. He's kind of just, sat back and let everything play out the way that it has. He realizes he's not going to be here next year. He's a free agent. But I think in hindsight, the Mitch Trubisky signing really didn't make any sense because I think the Steelers would have been fine with a quarterback room of Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, and then whoever is a third body. I don't know if it would have been, if they still would have spent the 7th round pick on Chris Oladokin and actually had him make the team or something as a practice squad or something. But I don't think in hindsight, if you tell them Kenny Pickett's fallen to 20, they keep or they still make the Mitch Trubisky signing.
Although honestly, let me ask you this. So I don't think so either. But let me ask you this: out of Mitch and Mason, who do you think is more likely to be on the Steelers next season?
Mason.
I would say Mason.
Yeah.
I think there's a good shot, especially if he is at the point in his career where he's okay being the backup to Kenny in that fashion, and I think he's shown this year that he's able of emotionally handling that. But if he's okay and he kind of puts out feelers and he's not getting anything back, like this team wants you, then he's comfortable with the Steelers organization, and the Steelers are obviously comfortable with him. They kept him around. And so I think that there's a better shot that Mason Rudolph is the backup next year to Kenny, and that Mitch is just going to be released.
Yeah. No, you're right. I said that he's gone next year, but I think that there is a path to him being the backup for this football team. I think he will want to test the waters, but you're right. I mean, how many teams does he realistically look at and say, I got a chance to start here? I don't think there's many. I mean, I know that he would like that opportunity.
I mean,
but
what Houston, even though they're going to draft a quarterback?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that you're looking at best case scenario. It'd probably be like a Trubisky scenario where it's like he goes somewhere that currently doesn't have a quarterback, but they very well could pick a quarterback this year, and maybe he starts a couple games at the beginning of the year or something like that. Yeah. I think that's probably best case scenario for Mason, but I think there is a path to him being back as the backup next year. What else from this game did I want to talk about?
The punting,
the special teams in general, because they also had a blocked field goal in this game, or a field goal get blocked on them in this game. Calais Campbell, who I feel like blocks a kick like every other week, it seems like, for the Ravens. That just, that doesn't happen. And people were saying, I want to clear something up too, by the way. And I want to see what you think about this, because everybody just likes to add points at the end. So people are like, if that field goal doesn't get blocked, the Steelers win this game just because they add 3 points and make it 17-16. But the way I'm looking at it is if they make that field goal,
if Mitch doesn't throw 3 picks, those could be 3 touchdowns.
Well, but what I wanted to say is like, but also I think the Ravens probably play defense differently on the drive where Freiermuth ends up scoring the touchdown late. Like, I don't think they just let them go down the field the way that they did for the most part.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's as simple as just adding 3 points at the end of the game to say the Steelers win without a blocked field goal. But anyway, the punting issues as well. Man, it's just so frustrating with Presley Harvin, just because you've seen him do it before. You've seen him, punt the ball 60 yards. We've also seen him punt less than 20 yards. And you just can't have that inconsistency. You saw it
on Sunday. It was a 17-yard punt.
Yeah, you can't see this, like, the body of work is long enough now where it's a problem. Like, we're not just talking about a small sample size at this point. And it's just so hard because he's an easy guy to root for. You empathize with his story and his situation that he went through last year. But it's just, from a professional standpoint, what you're getting has not been good enough from him. And you see, like, what a guy that he was competing with last year in Corliss Waitman, what he's done since leaving the organization, and all these other opportunities and guys that are out there. It's just for the Steelers to continue to hang their hat on this guy figuring it out on game days, because it's really just a game day issue. He's fine in practice and everything.
Right.
Maybe he's just not built for the bright lights, but it just can't continue to happen.
Well, here's what I don't understand about special teams is the Steelers are okay whenever Boswell goes down, they bring in Skiba. He makes all the kicks in the game that he's in, and then they release him and they sign Wright. So if Harvin is not making his punts, why are they not bringing another punter in? Well, I mean, you have a kicker who didn't miss a kick in a game, and they still replaced him.
Mm-hmm.
And your punter is terrible, and you're refusing to replace him.
They invested a draft pick into a special teams player.
7th round pick.
Yeah.
Those are meaningless.
I know. But that's a position that you can typically get, like, an undrafted guy and just bring him in, sign somebody off the street. For them to invest a draft pick at all, I think is too much of an indictment of how they feel about him for them to cut bait so quickly. But that's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like we're past the point of it being quickly.
Yeah, well, when you net 27 yards punting on Sunday, then there's no excuse.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't go back and watch the blocked field goal, So I don't know who, is responsible for that. If it's just, you just got to tip your cap to Calais Campbell and the Ravens or what. But I mean, it definitely was a difference maker. I just don't think that you can just say if they make that, the Steelers win the football game just because of how things played out after that. Again, going back to the rush defense, the Ravens killed 7 minutes of clock from the 10-minute to 3-minute mark, all by running the football.
Yeah.
To make it a
also,
two-possession game.
I have J.K. Dobbins in the Dynasty League that we're in. So happy to see him actually do something as a pro.
That's that's fantastic news for you because I think he's just going to continue to get more. He only had like 14 or 15 touches in this game, and he still won for $120. So
yeah,
and a touchdown. But I wanted to obviously still with the Steelers here talk about a couple of transactions. They bring back Ola. I mean that was written. I feel like as soon as we saw that he was being released by the Titans, we knew he was coming home. This is a way, like we know Malik Reed's been dealing with an injury. TJ's obviously not 100%. So it's nice to have the familiarity back. We know he's a really good special teams player, but he can provide something I think is like a third or fourth edge player. He's probably an upgrade on what they had there. And then Jonathan Marshall coming over from the Jets practice squad and signed to the 53-man after, Wormley was placed on IR with a torn ACL. The thing is, I don't know anything about this guy, but I see Jets fans that are pretty upset. I mean, this was probably their deepest position group, maybe outside of receiver for the Jets. And they're very upset about losing this guy because he actually has some youth to him where they have a ton of youthful defensive linemen over there. We obviously don't have that here. So maybe we're just getting really lucky here that the Jets just didn't have a spot for this guy. But I don't think he can be worse than some of the depth options that we have here. So I'm intrigued. That's all I can say about it.
On the Steelers defensive line.
Yeah.
But
I'm intrigued.
To me, it sucks. Listen, I never want to see anybody get injured, whether it's on my team or any other team. But if one person was going to get injured, why did it have to be Wormley, who is actually having somewhat of a promising season on the defensive line?
It's really tough for him too because he's a free agent as well.
Yeah.
So it's like in 30 years old, like it's just it's really bad all the way around. For him,
I thought he was having a pretty decent season.
Yeah,
and
he had a really nice year last year. So he was probably in line for his best payday in the NFL, and then this happens. So someone also asked me another question on Instagram that I wanted to talk about and wrap up with. What's the excuse for the number of playoff wins under Tomlin in the past 10 plus years? So this is all. Yeah, I mean, I don't have one. That's the thing. But the thing is too, like, I think it's an organizational failure, top down, the success that the team has had. That's why I talk about, like, anytime someone wants to bring up Ben or Tomlin, it's not Tomlin that doesn't have a losing season. It was Ben that didn't have a losing season, even though statistically that's not correct. I just think top down, you can look at what this organization has done in the last 10 plus years and realize that this isn't just a Tomlin issue. Don't get me wrong. He has his flaws, and I think it's completely okay to talk about those. I think that it's ridiculous that people are so far to one side where it's just so anti-Tomlin and he needs to be fired, or so pro-Tomlin that you can't criticize him at all. There's definitely some middle ground there, and that's where I am. I think he's a very good head coach. I think he's one of the best, like, leader of men and ralliers of a locker room that you can have. I think his ability to keep people in line and kind of keep personalities in check is as good as it gets around the league. But game day decisions, there's sometimes a lot to be desired there, in my opinion. And obviously he knows more football than I could ever hope to know. But I have the benefit of hindsight as well when talking about this. But there's so much to the Steelers not having a playoff win since 2016 that it isn't just, Tomlin. We can talk about Ben. We can talk about the defenses giving up 45 points to Jacksonville at home.
That's what I was going to say, is that during the Killer Bees era, you didn't have a defense. Yeah. And post Killer Bees era, you don't have an offense.
Yeah.
That's a very dumbed down version of an explanation. Yeah. But that's just a general, like, for half a decade you didn't have a defense, and now you don't have an offense, and you haven't for almost half a decade up to this point.
Right. And Tomlin is part of that process. So, like, you can blame him, you can blame Kevin Colbert, anybody that has a hand in this process.
I also blame position coaches. I blame coordinators. Yeah. Like, sure. There's a lot of blame to go around besides the head coach.
Yeah. He's certainly part of it, but I don't know what else to say besides that, to be honest with you. I'm still not at the point where I would fire him, but I understand a lot
No,
of the
it's just
criticism.
so stupid that people are. Because and listen, I know the never having a losing season thing doesn't mean everything, but having one losing season since 2007 doesn't mean that you should be fired because you actually had a losing season. Typically, coaches get at least a couple losing seasons before their seats even gets warm. So I wouldn't even say that Tomlin's seat is lukewarm right now. Like it's still pretty
No,
cold.
that's the thing is I think he should be afforded the opportunity to see if he can turn it around post Ben, if he wants to. We'll see what his future holds from his end if he wants to still be here. But I think he should be afforded an opportunity to give this some time and see if we can develop Kenny Pickett and see where the team is at in a season or two, as opposed to immediately, as soon as the team is bad and Ben leaves, that's it.
Yeah. Well, I feel bad for you that actually goes to games because you have to deal with the poor fans at
I mean,
that
listen,
are pissed off at Steeler games.
it's not even Steeler fans suck even when the team's good. So yeah, imagine when they're this.
I mean, this is why this is why my opinion has always been that fans suck. It doesn't really matter who's it for. All fans suck.
I agree, but I think it's heightened within some fan bases, and I think the Steelers, because of their popularity, are one of them.
Yeah.
So, but I agree in general. Moving on to the Penguins, where the fans definitely really suck, and I can't, not that I can't wait, but we are definitely going to see that years down the road. But let's not talk about that because I don't want to wish away time.
So
This
you
team is
can't
still
wait.
very good right now.
You're looking forward to it?
No, that's not what I meant to say. That's why I had to clarify before it came out of my mouth. But listen to what I'm about to say. Again, just last week we talked about how the Pens didn't have a loss from the time that we had recorded the previous episode to last week's show. They did it again. They beat the Sabres twice and the Stars within the time from last show to this show. We just don't lose anymore. We're like Chase Claypool's rookie season, 11 weeks through, when he tweeted that he doesn't know what losing is. But this team has really turned it around. And I think that while we may have a lot of people may have hit the panic button too early. I think there were some valid criticisms. I think that it was pretty obvious to see, like, okay, as soon as Tristan Jarry kind of sets in, as long as he can find his footing, like, there's no way that they're just going to continue to not score literally everybody. I think Joe brought up a great point last week where it's like a lot of bottom six guys are streaky. It's just they can't all go cold at the same time. And that's exactly what was happening with the Penguins. And a lot of guys have just settled in nicely into their roles. So this team is kind of humming on all cylinders right now. But the turnaround in net, I think, is a big part of why this team has gotten to where they are over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, Jari's been great. I'm trying to pull up his stats right now just to see what it's been over this last little stretch. But I think the team in general has been really good. And
they're insulating him well too. Sure,
yeah, for sure. Like he's getting good play in front of him. So let's see. In his last 5 games, Jari has allowed. Let's see. It's 919 save percentage, 929, 974, 903, 963. So above 9 on every single game, and most of those are above 920, 925. It's been a really good stretch for Jari, really good stretch for the Penguins in general. And you're getting guys chipping in. Like I think Brock McGinn has kind of elevated his game a little bit.
8 goals on the year so far.
Yeah, it's been really good. And then, I mean, the guys that we continue to talk about continue to be good. I mean, Ricard Raquel, Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin got the game-winning goal the other night. And I think that what we're seeing right now is basically the Pens firing on all cylinders. And this is why whenever you ask me on the show, whenever they were on that 7-game losing streak, like, do I think that the season is not I'm paraphrasing, by the way. He didn't ask me if the season's over or anything, but like, could they get out of it? I mean, absolutely. And like, look at what we've been seeing. They've won 7 games in a row, I believe, or 6 games in a row. 7 games in a row. So I think that the Penguins right now are playing really good as a team. It's not just one line. It's not just one pairing. It's not just the goalie playing well. They're really clicking on all cylinders, and that's why they've been winning these games. And it's not been pretty the entire time. I mean, they still got their bumps throughout the games, It's not like they're blowing every single team they play out, but they've just been finding ways to win, and they've been a really gritty team. I mean, the way that they won that game on Monday night against Dallas, scoring with 35 seconds left, Malkin finds the back of the net. I mean, that's just kind of a gritty way to win, and I think that's the way that they won in Buffalo as well. The game that was in Pittsburgh, I think that was a little more in command with the Penguins. Just speaking of the games of this past week, I mean, Sid has 2 goals in that game. Incredible pace that he's on right now. We talked about it last week, but he's just continues to be such a dominant player, and it's so impressive, and it's so awesome to see him just game after game perform the way that he does. But I just think that the Penguins right now are playing like, and honestly, I give credit to Mike Sullivan. I think this is what you would see where you see a team buy in. This is the team that buys in. They're playing to Sullivan's system. They're playing as a team. They're playing together, and everybody you can tell is bought in. And that's why I'm saying, like, it's not just like complete dominance throughout the games, but they're bought into enough to where they are going to compete the entire game and really grind for these wins. And so I think the wins have not just been impressive on the part of, oh, they're winning the game, but it's just also how they've been winning some of these games too. They're not letting any like confliction happen between any of the players or any of the games. They're letting the games they're letting themselves control the games is what I'm trying to say. They're not going to let the game play out against them. They're trying to control the game. So it's been really good.
They're also not allowing, a goal or two on the power play literally every single game like it seemed like they were during that losing streak.
That's true.
They've only allowed 1 power play goal in general since Teddy Bluger came back, which is insane. Just the difference that he's made for the power play and also stabilizing that bottom 6 just goes to show how important of a player he is, despite, not being a guy that scores 15, 20 goals. But yeah, so that's been nice to see. I want to talk about, you mentioned Gino scoring the game winner in that Dallas game. The first goal scored by POJ, which to me, he's been one of the stories to me of this season so far for the Penguins. I look at what obviously Sidney Crosby's pace this year. If I'm picking 3 things to talk about this Penguin season, though, it's the pace that Sidney Crosby is on, Ricard Raquel living up to the contract that I absolutely hated, and POJ showing that he is a top 4 NHL defenseman, even though he's kind of playing still in like third pairing minutes at this point.
Yeah.
But really, what he's showing this team is that he belongs in the NHL, and it's really so nice to see, like, the confidence that he's playing with. That goal that he scores, it's just, he looks like a seasoned veteran right now. He skates as well as anybody out on the ice. I think that what you see when you're seeing POJ at his best is a player like that, like skating confidently, pushing the pace, and can break the puck out of his own zone very cleanly and effortlessly. Almost, I don't want to say exactly Chris Letang like, but it has a little bit of that element to it with the ease in which he moves around with when he is at his best.
There's our clickbait title. POJ is better than Chris Letang.
There it is. There is, of course, it can't just be easy for the Penguins. We're getting to that point, it looks like, where things are going to snowball a little bit here. A couple injuries to talk about. Jeff Petrie going on LTIR, which is funny because he said he was fine after the game, but it looked bad. Like, immediately you see his hand go into the boards and the way that his wrist bent, and you're just like, oh man, he just broke his wrist or something. And just immediately holding it, runs down the runway, and then he says after the game he's fine. Well, he missed Monday's game and then was put on LTIR on Wednesday. So not fine, Jeff Petrie. Thanks for lying to us. And then Jason Zucker, who exited that game in the second period, but did come back and finish the game in the third while looking pretty uncomfortable doing so, was also deemed week to week with an injury. So, I mean, I wish that I could just say, like, let's get these out of the way now, but that's not necessarily how it works.
We have seen that that's not the way it works. You're gonna get certain injuries out of the way in November and December, and then more are going to keep piling up into March and April. That's just kind of the way it is.
Right. It's so unfortunate because despite the way that we had been talking about Jeff Petrie, if you look at it, really outside of the number of penalties that he's taken, his game has really he's elevated his game for sure. I think he's kind of stabilized here. And again, I go back to last week's show and got to give Joe some credit because he mentioned, like, let's give it some time. Maybe it's just like not having familiarity with a new system, and his game will stabilize. I think that's kind of what we've seen. While I would like to see some more offensively from him, I think that what we saw from that top power play unit when he had to take the spot of Chris Letang was enough for me to be like, okay, maybe this guy's not completely washed and there is still some offensive upside to his game. And then how unfortunate for Jason Zucker, who, going back to last year, we've talked about just the injuries continuing to pile up. But I feel even worse about it this year just because of the season that he's been having.
Yeah, it's been really good, and it just sucks because this is a guy that has continuously been injured as a Penguin, and he's having the best season of his career as a Penguin, honestly. And to have him get injured again, you just kind of feel for the guy at this point. You think of just outside of what this means for the Penguins, but just what this means for the player, what it does to him mentally. I mean, knowing like how often he gets hurt. I want to say he has like Bo Bennett syndrome, but it kind of feels that way where how often he's getting injured. And the thing is, it's not like an aggravating injury that keeps happening over and over again. I feel like his injuries have all been different and like, not connected to each other. It's really just been a series of unfortunate events to steal the title of the book for Jason Zucker. But hopefully he has a speedy recovery. And then to speak on the Petrie stuff, I'm just saying it sucks that he's injured. But while he's on LTIR, if you want to get a little experimental, you will have the cap space now to bring up Ty Smith if you want to see what he looks like on that left side. So I'm not saying that you take POJ out. I think take Dumoulin out. Let's have POJ, Marcus Pettersson, and Ty Smith on that left side, and then you'll have Letang, Ruda, and Ruhwedel on the right side, and just see what happens. I don't think that it's not that the Penguins were looking for this opportunity, but the opportunity is here to at least experiment a little bit and see what you have in Ty Smith too. Because to speak to POJ, he's taken the opportunity and ran with it this season. Because we were talking about this guy, like if they're not going to play him, you should just trade him. And now it looks like, well, why would we trade him? Because of how well he's playing. I think he's taken this opportunity, grabbed it by the wheel, and just kept with it. And I'm really happy for him, and I'm really happy that he's on the team right now. But while Petrie's out, you do have that cap space relievement from the LTIR use. So if the Penguins, now I don't know that they're going to do it because they might just look at it and be like, why do we need to right now? And even if they call up Ty Smith, there's a good chance, knowing Sullivan, that he's just going to sit in the press box and not even play. So I think that there's a case that could happen, but I'm just saying they have the capability of doing it now if they want to see what that looks like.
Yeah, they've already called up Mark Friedman and Drew O'Connor to take the roster spots, but I'm with you. I mean, I think this is the time to try it, just because if you look at next year, what you're expecting from the defense, like Brian Dumoulin, unless he's extended, and I please don't do it. You're going to have that.
I might feel about the Penguins like I do the Pirates.
I think that you need to get a look at this guy. I mean, you traded John Marino for him in a 3rd round pick. You got to figure out what you got. So I would give him some time now while you have the opportunity to do so. I don't think that the team is going to. I think that we're going to see the pairings shake out like we did on Monday against the Stars, at least for the foreseeable future. And even if not, say somebody else goes down, God forbid, I think they play Friedman before they play Ty Smith.
Probably. I mean, and I don't blame him. I mean, Sullivan likes Friedman. I think he likes the type of defenseman he is. So that would make sense.
And he adds something that isn't in their lineup currently. Like when he is in the lineup, you have a little bit more of a presence, somebody that adds add some sandpaper. Yeah. So to me, I think Friedman would get the first crack out of him and Smith. But I could be wrong. It could just be a thing like if you're going to have one of them appear healthy scratch, it should be Freeman. That way Ty Smith can keep playing in the AHL. If there were actually an opportunity to play, maybe it would be Ty Smith. It's just if I'm flipping a coin, I think the organization, or not necessarily the organization, I think Sullivan would roll with Friedman before Smith.
I don't know what his possession metrics look like, but in Ty Smith, his Wilkes-Barre numbers, at least just goals and assists wise, is 4 goals, 9 assists, and 13 points in 22 games.
It's pretty solid for a defenseman. Yeah.
Yeah. So Again, don't know what the possession metrics looks like. Those could be awful, but
and
at
we know
least
Friedman's an expected goals god, just like Chad Ruhwedel's been this year.
True.
So. But to your point about POJ and the trade thing, I mentioned it like, man, what a blessing in disguise it's been that they didn't move him or Marcus Pettersson, because to me, those have been their two best defensemen.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think I have anything else. How many games we got for the next episode?
Let's see. I think we have at least 3. Could be wrong. So we play tomorrow. Well, when this comes out tonight against on Thursday against the Panthers, and then we play on Sunday against Carolina, and on Tuesday against the New York Rangers. So we'll be recording next Wednesday. 3 and then also just looking ahead, even past our next recording, they'll play on Thursday. Next Thursday, they play the Hurricanes again. So
that's a tough stretch coming up. I mean, you'd feel pretty happy if we're talking about 2 wins probably on the next episode. So
yeah,
with that stretch they got. I know the Rangers haven't been the Rangers of last year. Oh man, who would have thought that the team that was just ridiculous on special teams, not good at 5v5, and just had the best goaltending in like 20 years, was going to come crashing down a little bit. But
yeah, and not to mention after that, just looking ahead again, like, so we got the Panthers, Hurricanes, Rangers, Hurricanes, and then we play the Islanders, Red Wings, Devils, Bruins, Knights. Yeah, there's a
I can't wait to get our
stretch.
I can't wait to get our first crack at the Devils. What a story they are.
Yeah. They're actually, it's amazing that they're still in first place. I mean, to do it for like a month or two, that's one thing, but to be going into midway December and you're still in first place, that's impressive, and that's something that nobody saw coming.
No, not yet. You know that they're building something there, but to me at this point already, I think a lot of people are knocking their roster just because they have a lot of the same type of player, a lot of undersized guys that are just like super talented, but you can kind of push around. Yeah. But you know, like the old heads of hockey are always going to knock those style of players. So
yeah, and I mean they're 6 points ahead of the Hurricanes right now.
Crazy. I mean, good for them. But like I said, I can't wait to see the Penguins match up with them, and should be a good measuring stick to see where the Penguins are at that point. So
yeah.
But other than that, as always, I will once again mention for the last time, this is your opportunity to get involved with the year 5 of Rocking Around the 412. The link to that will be in the description of the show, wherever you are watching or listening to it. You can also just search it on Twitter. You can find it in Google. You can just go on to GoFundMe and search Rock Around the 412. It will come up wherever. But every single penny that is donated goes directly to helping families in our area. Well, in my area, Tyler's former area, where Tyler's from, 724-412 area codes. Providing Christmas in its entirety to families and children. And last year we were able to give 30 different kids across 13 different families Christmas. This year it's going to be, thanks to the story that I will once again share at the end of this, thanks to Kaylee, it's going to be over 20 for sure as well again. But to go hand in hand with that, the Isla Keen Fund is also rocking and rolling, just like Rocking Around the 412, and you can find that in the description of this as well. And please donate to that. It's going to be open, and I don't know for how long. It might just stay open forever. It's got close to $34,000 raised. Our friend Dalton Keene passed away in early October unexpectedly and left behind a 2-year-old daughter named Isla. And obviously the only thing that we can really help out with that, other than just being there for them, is the financial burden that comes along with that. So you guys can donate to that. And like I said, it will stay open. Isla was actually going to be one of the Rocking Around the 412 kids. And when I reached out to Kaylee, her mother, she said, while that is very kind and thoughtful, what we would rather do is this. And this is finding kids through the Salvation Army's program that they have set up and providing Christmas for them. So Kaylee, adopted 3 kids for Christmas. So the way it works is, I guess they have a Christmas tree and there's these lists with the kids, and you just pick one off and say, I want to adopt this kid for Christmas. And that's what we did for 15 different kids collectively. Kaylee did 3, we did 12, and it's all going to be in Dalton's name. So very excited to be able to do that. But like I said, so there's 15 kids there. One of the other families that already finished shopping for is 5. Another one that I'm doing tomorrow is 3. So at least 23 kids this year are going to have their Christmas given to them through Rock Around the 412 as well, which is absolutely awesome. Some of them have been repeat families over the years, but just the number of people that we are collectively impacting. When you see the numbers, it really means so much more to know and see where the money is going directly. So can't wait to start getting you guys some pictures and videos of this stuff when that time comes. But it's been a special year, and despite a lot of this coming via such a tragic situation, it's been amazing to see so many people rally around it and turn it into something beautiful at the end of the day. And that's really what life is. We can't help some of the terrible things that people go through in their lives, but we can be there as human beings and be there to lift them up and create something beautiful out of it. And that's really all I can say about it. And you can relate that to a lot of different things in life.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, when you're listening to this, you have like a day or two to donate. So
yeah, you
go
better
for
get
it
on it quick if you want to.
At least that's for Rock Around the 412. You have,
yeah.
It seems like a lot longer time, a lot longer for Isla Keen's future. So
yeah. As far as Rock Around the 412 goes, though, yeah, you're gonna have until the 17th to get those donations, and you can reach out to Tyler or I around the 412, our personal accounts. At the very least, I ask that you guys share it. It costs $0.00 to at least share it, and you don't know whose eyes and ears you might put on the mission by doing so. I know not everybody's in a position to donate, especially with what the last couple of years have brought. So at the very least,
Cuban's brother follows us. We should get him to share it to his brother.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, just and buy the show or something. Sponsor the show. What are we doing?
Exactly.
But anyway, we can't thank you guys enough for your participation throughout this thing, your support throughout the 5 years of doing this. And, we're just so blessed to be in this position to be able to provide Christmas in the way that we do. So for Tyler, for all the kids, for Kaylee, for the Keen family, for everybody that's involved with this, Joe and Drew with their involvement over the last couple of years as well, we can't thank you enough. We look forward to seeing you guys, your names in the donations for Rock Around the 412 for the Isla Keen Fund, and some of you guys also winning some prizes. But we will talk to you guys next week. We still got one more episode before Christmas, so I'm not gonna say Merry Christmas yet, but continue to enjoy the holiday season until we talk to you, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.